It's with great sadness that I announce the death of former city employee Robert Gorski. Robert was hired as the city's first accessibility issues coordinator in the spring of 1989. Robert began hosting Pasadena media show Access for All, through which he continued his lifelong work of improving accessibility for the Pasadena community. He was a good man with a kind soul. Many of us are saddened by this loss.
I produce a show called Access for All. It explains the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's a lot of information out there. I've just showed you the tip of the iceberg. Well, let's now play ADA Jeopardy 2010. All right. The category Los Angeles. Thank you for watching, and we'll see each other again next time.
So then we will adjourn in the memory of Robert Gorski.
And I like to say at the end of every show, I'm looking forward to the day when the Pledge of Allegiance ends with liberty, justice, and access for all, because accessibility is good for everybody.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot for the city to recognize somebody like this. I think it's welcome to City Hall, which is a place that Robert knew well. It's interesting, you saw the city manager, Steve Mermel, adjourning our city council meeting in the memory of Robert when he passed. That's not an ordinary thing. We have these, I mean, it's Pasadena, right? So we have all these protocols about one thing and another, and when we adjourn a meeting in someone's memory, in someone's honor, we do that for people who have made extraordinary contributions to the city, have served on commissions, have been elected officials, have been, famous people in Pasadena. And we're limited because there are lots of valued and important people that live in our small town. And as far as city employees are concerned, we don't typically recognize city employees in that way because we have 2,200 employees, and there are people coming and going all the time, and so it's not typical for us to acknowledge city employees when they pass because it's sort of a separate category, and frankly, it's expected that they will have made a contribution to the city. That's how they're earning their living, and that's what they're supposed to be devoting their activities to. But when we got the unhappy news about Robert, we all sort of looked at each other and said, well, this is different. And I think the reason it's different is because he left such a remarkable imprint on Pasadena. Pasadena likes to think of itself as a diverse place and a welcoming place for all kinds of people. And yet somehow, and you know, we talk about our diversity very proudly, and we think it's one of our real strengths, and we encourage all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and we revel in their achievements. But this is the community that Robert represented is a community that's not acknowledged usually in that conversation. And I thought his comments about the Pledge of Allegiance with liberty, justice, and access for all really captures that. This is a community that's not typically acknowledged. And Robert was a remarkable man in the sense that he was clearly, and he was paid to be, an advocate for accessibility in our community. And he was very determined and firm in terms of the arguments that he made on behalf of that community. But he was patient, and he was reasonable and reasoned in his arguments. Sometimes it's easy to advocate if you're prepared to just pound on the table and make demands whether you know they're achievable or not. That's the kind of easy advocacy. You can be determined and obnoxious and loud and demonstrate by the volume of your demands how effective you're being. But that wasn't what Robert was about. Robert was firm in his demands, and but he preferred, at least in my work with him, he did it with reason, with facts, with information, with an understanding of what the environment was, and he was playing the long game. He didn't want to wait forever for things to be done, and you can look around our buildings in the city and our curb cuts and all the physical manifestations of his work to know that he wasn't prepared to wait forever. But he was playing the long game. He understood that this was something that when you make these kinds of societal changes, sometimes it takes longer than you might like, or in his case, longer than he had. The other thing that I think is instructive about Robert is that after he retired, he continued to work at the cause that he had devoted his life to. And he did that on a volunteer basis. Pasadena, again, prides itself on its volunteers and all the volunteer work and nonprofits that we have in town, and the fact that so much of what we achieve is done by volunteers. And here he was again. So I saw as much of him lately as I had seen when he was working for the city. And there again is a tribute to the fact that he obviously wasn't just collecting a paycheck. This was something that he was devoted to in his soul. And so those of us that worked with him know that that was true. So this is a guy that we will all miss. I was delighted actually to learn that people wanted to gather here, other than wedding parties and quinceañeras, that people wanted to gather, they're fine too, but they wanted to gather here in City Hall courtyard to pay a tribute to Robert's work and his life. He was a delightful man. He was an effective man. He was a truly valued public servant. And the city of Pasadena is better for his having been here, and we will certainly miss him. Thank you very much.
First of all, again, thank you, Terry. Where are you, Terry? Thank you. I'm on the Accessibility and Disability Commission, and every so often you need information or you need a favor. The mayor's office has always been open to us, and again, that's why we're here today, and your remarks were really wonderful, so thank you. My name is Martin Sweeney, and I'm a commissioner with the City of Pasadena's Accessibility and Disability Commission. I first met Robert some 20 years ago. At that time, I was working at the Frank D. Latterman Regional Center in Los Angeles. The Regional Center's catchment area includes Pasadena, and I remember driving out to Pasadena to interview Robert about his work as Pasadena's first accessibility issues coordinator, and we quickly discovered that we knew a lot of the same people. I wore a couple of hats: as a parent of a daughter with cerebral palsy and as an assisted technology specialist. Robert was a member of that first wave of disability advocates from across the nation, those who shaped the disability rights movement and fought for the passage of the landmark civil rights legislation, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. After our first meeting, I remember being taken by Robert's interest, experience, and expertise. His big grinning smile put you at ease, and over the years, our paths would occasionally cross. When our family moved to Pasadena, I would spot Robert wheeling down Colorado Boulevard. But by the time I joined the commission, Robert had already retired after more than 30 years of service to our city. And that's when I actually started to get to know Robert. He was always welcoming and opening to share his deep knowledge and awareness for the city's efforts in making Pasadena a welcoming, inclusive, and accessible city. Our conversations would start and pick up at Conrad's. I know. We've all been to Conrad's with Robert. One of Robert's go-to spots. He liked the darker back room at Conrad's, old school with that old wooden bar. Those lunches were fun. In addition to his expertise in all things accessible, Robert was a Renaissance man. When I discovered his dry wit, I would often catch myself laughing at one of his passing remarks maybe 2 hours later. And again, if any of you saw Access for All on Pasadena Media, and I remember watching it, I think it must have been late at night. I was sitting in the couch, and I turned it on for the first time, and when I saw Wheelchair Boy and Stone of Truth, I just couldn't help but break out laughing loud. That was Robert's humor. One afternoon, while visiting Robert at his condo, he pulled out an archive of Disabled USA, a quarterly publication he edited for the Office of Employment of Persons with Disabilities in Washington, D.C. Robert was the magazine's editor for over 7 years. It's an impressive body of work during an exciting period of social change. Disabled USA covered a vast range of issues affecting people with disabilities, including employment, training, healthcare, housing, support services, education, and just about everything you can imagine, including many pieces written by Robert. If you're curious, I Googled Disabled USA and the archive's online, and it's really an amazing body of work. You'll hear his voice. From start to the very end, as the mayor had mentioned, Robert was a fierce, articulate, and effective advocate for people with disabilities, their families, and the Pasadena community. One Disabled USA cover declares, "What employers are doing and should be doing." Robert has a piece titled, "And Now These Messages, a New Bridge Between Industry and Persons with Disabilities." So the publication had all these esoteric topics that they were covering that meant everything to a movement that was pushing for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in this article, it starts off, so you'll hear Robert's voice, and the irony of this one is, you know, if you write a lead paragraph, you're supposed to cover the who, what, when, and wheres. He starts off his saying, "No, this article does not delineate another attitudes program or barrier removal project that a company is utilizing to increase the number of disabled employees. Instead," so now he's going to tell us what the article's about, "it's about companies which, in pursuit to the almighty dollar, are courting some disabled people in a special manner in order to encourage them to purchase consumer products." Robert is off to the races. The article is about the marketplace and how public policy over captioning television commercials for millions of deaf and hearing impaired persons. Robert's last paragraph jumped out at me. Years ago, there was a popular song that commented, "You're nobody till somebody loves you." Truly, the world of commerce cannot provide the depth and intensity of human support explicit in the idea of loving. But respect and self-esteem are other emotions important to human beings. Quote, "You've got somebody when somebody else thinks you're worth selling to." And it's not a very lyrical remark, and it does not communicate tender sentiments. Nevertheless, it does express a truism of the marketplace, and it is a milestone for mainstreaming disabled people and able-bodied persons into one society. So you can see where he took us from something that was commerce and market related, and he reminded us of the values that hold us together. That was Robert. I can hear Robert's voice, that dry wit and lyricism, always leaning to the brighter side, reminding us that love, respect, and self-esteem matter too. Now that's a sentiment we could all use a little more of in 2020. On behalf of the Accessibility and Disability Commission, and while saddened by Robert's death, today we celebrate Robert's life and are deeply grateful for the path he has left us. The Commission has already begun discussion for an annual award in Robert's name, given in recognition to an individual who has demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to promoting greater awareness and opportunity in making the city of Pasadena a fully accessible and inclusive community for all. It seems like a natural fit. We miss you, Robert. Rest in peace.